So here's the thing. What everyone agrees upon is that Donald J. Harris is the big question mark in this family. Something is not making sense. And that something is his written piece regarding his Jamaican heritage, his Jamaican ancestry. And I'm just going to quickly remind you of what instantly flagged me as odd about that piece. Well, first and foremost, as we have said many times, he mentions both his mother and his father only once in one sentence in that piece. That is it. Just one sentence dedicated to his mother and his father. Extremely strange if you are doing a piece about your heritage. He also rather mysteriously claims that he doesn't know the ancestry at all of his grandmother, Miss Iris. Miss Iris, he writes Nay Finnegan. She wouldn't have been Nay Finnegan. She would have been Nay Allen. So that's strange to me as well, who he writes the entire article about. The entire article is about his grandmother, Miss Iris. So the fact that he is simultaneously claiming not to know her ancestry, we just got to run that through the bank of common sense, right? I was super close with both of my grandparents. It would be utterly bizarre for me to claim that I just didn't know their ancestry. Like, that is just something that comes up if you are very close to your grandparents, as he purports to be. He says Miss Iris raised him, and she was, Christiana Brown, Miss Chrissy raised him, and they were fortified and they were strong, and he learned all of these lessons from them. And yes, on Miss Iris, he just very quickly mentions that her ancestry is unknown to him. He also, in the piece, very obviously declines to mention all of his many siblings and half-siblings, only mentions one sibling. Her name is Enid Harris, and we know that he has at least 5. And regarding Enid Harris, we have not yet been able to find anything about her. Now, it is plausible that she got married and now has a different last name, and that's why we can only chase so many rabbits down the hole, but we have not been able to just verify who Enid Harris actually is from his piece. So we've got a sibling who he mentions that we can't find at all, and then about 5 siblings that we can find who he doesn't have anything to say about. So that's interesting. Now, I want to be clear. This family chart is what we're putting together of people that were married. Obviously, you can see Kamala Harris. We have the people that she says are her parents. I have question marks about that. We'll get to the bottom of it. And then we have Donald Harris. Now, I want to be clear. Donald Harris alleges that his mother is Beryl. So that is, we're just putting there up visually because we are speaking about Iris. In fact, we'll make a little edit and connect Donald Harris to Oscar. Beryl seems to be this question mark. But yes, we have now a confirmation from somebody who is saying that Donald Harris lived in the household for a time period with his father, and who would be Iris that he grew up with at some point, which would, in my mind, be his entire childhood because of when they got married. And so that fact, again, makes it exceedingly strange that he completely omitted that Iris from his Jamaican heritage article. Why are you skipping all of these relatives? It just doesn't make sense. I am absolutely giddy today, you guys. I did it. I spoke to Kamala's uncle officially. And by the way, he's a gem. 10 out of 10. I really wish that he was running for president instead of her, because he comes across as a very honest man. I'm going to tell you all about that conversation and how it's now led me to many more questions. So many more questions that I have about Kamala and her true heritage. Also, she's once again been asked about her racial identity. This happened just 3 days ago. And suddenly she's a little iffy on the answer. Kamala and me are now in a very particular kind of relationship. I'm like Maury, and she's essentially my guest. I'm asking her a question. Kamala, during your run as president, we asked you if your genealogy was actually Irish Indian.
You said no. The lie detector determined that was a lie.
Where to begin? Okay, so 2 days ago or 3 days ago, Kamala was asked again about her Black heritage, and suddenly she is getting a little iffy on the details.
What do you think when you hear people kind of questioning just the fabric of who you are?
Well, one, I don't listen to it.
Okay.
I'm really clear about who I am, and if anybody else is not, they need to go through their own level of therapy. That's not my issue.
Their issues, right?
My mother was very clear. She was raising 2 Black girls to be 2 proud Black women, and it was never a question. You know, it's funny because over the years, journalists, some, not most, will want to talk about it. And I say, okay, if you want to have this conversation, I'm prepared to have it, but sit down and get comfortable for a few hours. If you want to start talking about race in America, you want to talk about the 1/8 rule?
A drop.
Right. You want to talk about what it means in terms of who you are perceived to be and the impact that can have on the rest of your life, regardless of who you actually are in terms of your God-given capacity and the rights that you have and should have. So, I don't mess with that. I think that's other people trying to figure some stuff out that, and they
got some issues.
They got to, deal with it.
Actually, you need therapy. The problem is you. The problem is actually you for asking the question. No, Kamala, we're asking the question because you made this a theme in your bookie book, which we're going to get to in a little bit, okay? So you don't get to now just not address the question whatsoever. Put yourself in her shoes, okay? I'm going to put myself in her shoes. I'm running for president of the United States, okay? And these questions keep popping up about whether or not I am Black. Do you know how simple it would be to simply answer the question? List your Black relatives in 4 seconds. I would be like, this is my grandma, this is my grandpa. Suddenly she's a little iffy on the details here. Why didn't she just say, yes, obviously my grandmother is Beryl. Here's a picture of her. She's Black. I'm disgusted with the people that are even calling this into question. Here's my great grandmother, Iris Finnegan. I am obviously Black. Instead, she goes, oh, do you really want to talk about it? That's what I say to these shows. Do you really want to talk about race? Do you really want to talk about the 1/8 rule? I mean, how dare she? And the answer is yes, Kamala. Actually, I would like to talk about it. What about Indian Americans? Because strangely, she brings up her mom. You would think the first thing she would do would be to bring up her dad. Instead, she brings up her mom. She's like, my mom was very clear that she was raising 2 Black women. Your mother is Indian. Like fully 100% Indian. So the fact that the first person that you recall is a non-Black person is suspicious. And regarding Indian Americans, just to be clear, in 1923, the Supreme Court decided in the United States versus Bhagat Singh Thind that Indians were classified as Caucasians, as they had been by anthropologists. They upheld that, but they also made it clear that they were not considered white. So that is probably the answer as to why her mother put Caucasian on her birth certificate. That was actually the legal classification for Indian women. And by the way, as I was considering that, her upbringing and how strange it is that she keeps leaning into this idea, like she was born 2 years before my mother was born, and my mother didn't live through segregation. My mother didn't live through any of this stuff. These are not her memories. These are the memories of my grandparents. My grandfather lived through segregation. I'm going, why does Kamala keep doing this? Like acting like she grew up in the 40s and in the 50s with these sorts of memories. And then I remembered suddenly that she did this on stage a while ago, where she got almost teary-eyed and emotional talking about busing and desegregation. I'm going to roll that back for you just to jog your memory. Take a listen.
You also worked with them to oppose busing. And, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
Okay. Oh my God. Guys, so you watch that clip, okay? You're an American. You see she's getting a little choked up, and you can instantly assume that what she means is that she was like a Ruby Bridges. Yeah, like that little girl was me in 2nd grade. I was a part of the second class to be desegregated. Like that instantly signals, given the emotionality of it, that she was a Ruby Bridges. Talk about mining Black history. Well, let me be clear. She intentionally misled people here to make them believe that she was a young Ruby Bridges. This is how disgusting and despicable this woman is. She wanted people to go back in their minds to all they learned about Ruby Bridges, the images of Ruby Bridges having to be protected by police as she entered into that school in Louisiana. She wanted people to go back in their minds to that. That's why she's getting all choky. She's like on the brink of tears. That little girl. So to be perfectly clear here, that little girl went to Thousand Oaks Elementary School in Berkeley, and far from that impression she's giving, she did not live through any desegregation or any real desegregation at all, because as I mentioned, the schools had already gone through that before she was born, literally before she was born in 1947. In fact, the school district had to issue a statement after that performance on stage. And this is what they had to put up on their website for clarification. They wrote, "There has been some confusion in the media and social media around the Berkeley schools and integration due to the fact that our high school was already integrated, as evidenced, for example, by high school yearbooks, which show children of many race and ethnicities at school together prior to 1968. In Berkeley, we only have one comprehensive high school, so it was integrated by default. Our elementary schools, however, reflected the racial composition of our neighborhoods, which, like many neighborhoods across America, reflected the history of segregation stemming from policies which restricted the opportunities of non-white residents." So then they go on, "We recently celebrated the 50-year anniversary of our voluntary busing plan." And you can find additional details here. So let me clarify to you what actually happened in her childhood. There was no desegregation effort that she had to live through. She was not Ruby Bridges. Rather, what they realized was because of the past in which you had Black people all living in one neighborhood, and this was contributed sometimes because of like red line districting. You had Black people living in one neighborhood. You had white people living in one neighborhood. What ended up happening was that you had schools which were like majority Black and which were majority white. And so what they wanted to do in Berkeley was to be the first to offer a busing plan to turn that around so that the buses would pick up students that lived far from the white school and bring them over there so that the schools would be more evenly mixed. That's what she's describing. So after they put and implemented this busing plan, Kamala was the second or third class since they had implemented this busing plan. Nothing to do with desegregation, just an effort to say, okay, we're realizing now if people are just districted according to where they live, you're going to have these schools that are like 85% Black and some schools that are 85% white. That's what it is. So just thinking about the emotionality and how tricky she's being here, again, trying to allude to like some Ruby Bridges scenario, really makes me angry. It is just so unacceptable. I just can't stand this fraud. And it's so important to state also that the one-drop rule was declared officially unconstitutional in 1967. That was just 3 years after Kamala was born. This is just not her childhood at all. Not her childhood at all.